A townhome complex under construction goes up in flames.
And I looked over through my bathroom window and there's a big old wall of flame next door.
We're getting a look at the damage as firefighters search for a cause.
It really went up from zero to flash in just a couple minutes.
U.S. doctors are closely monitoring the latest Omicron subvariant, now accounting for the majority of new COVID-19 infections.
But we do know it to be more transmissible and more immune evading.
Plus, Von Miller returns to Denver and is rooting for the Broncos this season.
Even though I'm not wearing orange and blue, I still got orange and blue in my heart.
Happening now, the House Select Committee is holding another public hearing about the attack on the U.S. Capitol. That hearing expected to begin in just moments. Now, we expect to hear from Jason Van Tatenhove, a Colorado man who used to be a spokesperson for the Oath Keepers militia group. Now, Tatenhove wasn't at the Capitol attack, but lawmakers want him to give a historical overview of the Oath Keepers and other violent militias. He's already done 2 interviews with lawmakers in D.C. Lawmakers are also expected to call Stephen Ayers, an Ohio man who pleaded guilty to his role in the Capitol attack. Ayers posted on social media accusing President Biden and Democrats of treason and warning of a coming civil war. Now, we may also hear from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who recorded his testimony on Friday. You can watch that hearing right now on Denver 7. Well, several townhomes under construction went up in flames this morning. This video shows the fire in Lakewood near 16th and Route, just north of Colfax. As Denver 7's Christian Lopez reports, the flames caused some evacuations and another fire in the neighborhood.
It was a very scary morning for this neighborhood. Several people had to evacuate when that fire broke out. It started at this construction site where these townhomes were being built. 3 of them were destroyed. You can still see how active the scene is. Crews are working to put out any hot spots, but that fire was so intense that it actually caused the house right next door. You can see it right there, the side of that building. That home caught fire because of that heat exposure. And we talked to the 2 brothers who lived there. One of them said thankfully he was awake when it all happened, and so he was able to call 911 and they were able to evacuate safely.
Very, very scary because I thought, oh, there goes the house. And if I'd gone to bed, as I usually do, I probably wouldn't have noticed until the whole thing burnt down, with me in the house,
The 2 brothers were able to get temporary shelter thanks to the American Red Cross. And just to show you how close the fire got to other nearby homes as well, you can see that there are also apartments on this side. If we zoom in over there, you can see in that window that those blinds were melted from the fire. And right over here, this car was also impacted. Those flames melted this taillight. Crews are still looking into what the cause of the fire could be. We know that around 15 people in this neighborhood total were evacuated, but thankfully no one was injured. Reporting in Lakewood, I'm Christian Lopez, Denver 7.
Aurora is ready to put car thieves in jail with a no-tolerance policy. The city council passed a new ordinance last night creating a mandatory minimum 60-day sentence for people convicted of stealing cars. Repeat offenders would spend 120 days in jail. The tougher penalties go into effect next month. The city council also approved a plan for radar speed cameras in neighborhoods. 3 van-mounted cameras will be in place for the start of the school year. Colorado is changing how it reports COVID-19 data. Starting tomorrow, the CDPHE will transition its outbreak data to be more like other viruses, like the flu. The state's COVID website will still have an outbreak map, but it will only show active outbreaks in priority settings. Now, those include places like residential care facilities and child care centers. The White House COVID response team is addressing a new wave of infections across the U.S. They're also closely tracking a new Omicron subvariant. As Rena Roy reports, it's more transmissible and is now the dominant variant in the country.
As COVID cases rise once again in much of the country, health officials pointing the finger at Omicron subvariant BA.5, saying it's responsible for more than half of new infections.
We are closely monitoring BA.5 and its impact. We're encouraged that serious illness, hospitalizations, and deaths have remained relatively low based on the level of infections.
An average of 5,200 virus-positive Americans are hospitalized each day, the highest number of daily admissions since February, the U.S. averaging 100,000 new cases daily.
We do not know yet about the clinical severity of BA4 and BA5 in comparison to our other Omicron subvariants, but we do know it to be more transmissible and more immune evading.
But experts warn that number could actually be 7 times higher, with home tests often unreported.
We're not seeing an increase in deaths around the country, thankfully, but we are seeing a lot of increase in cases, and that is because of those small changes that occur. And until this virus is controlled everywhere around the globe, we're going to continue to see a lot of new strains coming, and that's going to be challenging to us all.
People in Los Angeles and New York urged to mask up once again.
Better safe than sorry. That's what I said. It's a simple thing to put on a mask.
Moderna reporting its new booster produced 6 times more antibodies against the BA4 and 5 subvariants a month after injection. But that new shot won't likely be available until October or November at the earliest.
There is some urgency to figure out the composition of the vaccine for the fall. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a rise in cases ahead of vaccination and we're trying to play catch up.
Vaccinations have significantly slowed. 71 million Americans still have not gotten a single shot. 44 million of those are kids, and more than half of the eligible population has not gotten their first booster. Rena Roy, ABC News, New York.
The U.S. and the World Bank are giving Ukraine close to $2 billion in additional aid. The money will pay salaries for healthcare workers and provide other essential services. Ukraine says paying salaries has become more difficult each month due to the war with Russia. The U.S. has sent more than $7 billion in aid to Ukraine since the war started in February. For the first time in 20 years, the dollar and the euro are worth the same amount. The euro fell 12% overnight, making it worth $1. Inflation in Europe is at about 8.5% right now. There are fears of a recession in Europe due to high inflation and energy supply uncertainty caused by Russia's war on Ukraine. U.S. economists are expecting another surging inflation report. The June Consumer Price Index will be released tomorrow morning, and it could be higher than May's 8.6 rate. Economists say it's because of energy prices. Economists are also warning inflation may not have peaked yet and could stay high longer than the Federal Reserve initially anticipated. The government is trying to slow down that record high inflation, and that means, well, the Fed could raise interest rates again later this month. As Dan Grossman reports, the Fed wants to slow inflation without sending the U.S. into a recession.
I think it's really important in this instance to separate out between the short term and the long term.
David Wessel doesn't say this to scare us, rather paint a realistic picture of what is going on with the economy.
I expect that more likely than not we'll have a recession in 2023. That means higher unemployment.
Wessel is the director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institution, a nonpartisan research group established more than 100 years ago. He's trying to answer the question we all have: when will prices go down? The difficult part is to do it. The Federal Reserve must shrink the economy through higher interest rates that make borrowing money more expensive and deter people from buying.
What they're basically saying is we're going to have some short-term pain in order to avoid much worse pain down the road. And that's easy for them to say because they all have jobs, but it's really unpleasant if you're on the person who has to bear the pain.
For more than a decade, Wessel says a lot of things were happening that favored lower prices: increased globalization, favorable trade deals, and more workers coming into the world economy. But after the pandemic, that changed. The massive amounts of stimulus money pumped into the economy to buoy families during that time among them.
We might be at an inflection point where a lot of the forces in the global economy were winds blowing to push prices down. And now some of those winds have shifted. And when we get through this ugly period, it may be that the forces of the world economy are pushing prices up.
The difficult part about combating those forces in the short term, Wessel says, is the Federal Reserve cannot predict how much its policies will affect the economy. It can only go off data from the past. It's why we've seen incremental interest rate hikes as the Fed evaluates the impact and then decides on next steps. In the longer term, Wessel says the Federal Reserve is looking at solutions that would sustain a strengthened economy, such as promoting more competition to knock prices, empowering unions to pump wages, and growing productivity.
If we make these investments, we have reason to believe that we can have faster productivity growth, and that will allow us to have more goods and services without paying more for them. That would be the happy ending.
I'm Dan Grossman.
Let's talk about those Avs now. We'll get a look at some of the Avs' youngest players today. The team is hosting a developmental camp for 29 players, including recent draft picks. The camp gives the coaching staff a chance to evaluate younger players and give those players a chance to learn more about the NHL. Valeri Nichushkin is sticking with the Avs for 8 more years. ESPN reports he signed an extension for $49 million. Nichushkin, or the choo-choo train as I like to call him, had the best regular season of his career, posting 25 goals and 52 points in 62 games. Former Bronco Von Miller back in Colorado. He was here for a Von's Vision Foundation fundraiser. His foundation has helped 8,000 kids get free glasses and eye care in the past 10 years. Our Broncos insider Troy Rank asked him about his thoughts on the Broncos this upcoming season.
I'm a huge fan of Russell Wilson, and this team is going to be great. It's bittersweet that I won't be here to be a part of it, but I still got orange and blue in my heart, and that'll stay there forever. You just really can't erase, the brotherhood that we've created here, and I'll still be a fan of the Denver Broncos. The Bills don't win it, I want the Broncos to win it, and it'll always be like that.
Well, we won't have to wait long to see the Broncos back on the field. Training camp starts 2 weeks from tomorrow. We're getting a much better look at our universe. Still ahead, the new images we're seeing from a NASA telescope and its Colorado connection. Plus, a Colorado State Park becomes the first one to require reservations. We have the details on when those reservations start.